Today in wrestling, we are talking about Johnny Gargano. We're talking about AEW not signing a former WWE superstar despite having them appear on television recently. Also, in addition to that, a WWE star has re-signed a long-term contract, and we're going to talk about it. I'm going to keep you updated with everything that's happening in pro wrestling along the way. Don't forget, the weekly WrestleMania Live Ango Show Extravaganza is happening this week. This is the schedule, and I hope to see you guys there. With that being said, we're going to jump right into the news. Today, we are going to start things off with Paul Heyman. If you guys are unfamiliar with what's happened with Paul Heyman, it may not actually be shocking, but he did reveal that he has re-signed a long-term contract with WWE. Now, I really enjoy Paul Heyman's work, and quite honestly, Paul Heyman has shown time and time again that he is not only an incredibly creative person, but he's not necessarily needed for the role of Roman Reigns' manager, right? Having Paul Heyman alongside the bloodline is not something that needed to happen, but it legitimized this new persona for Roman Reigns in so many different ways. Now, I don't know exactly in what ways Paul Heyman will continue to be an asset to WWE after this Roman Reigns storyline is over with. But I do believe WWE has a couple different ways of maneuvering around this. Right now, it's Paul Heyman with Roman Reigns, obviously Brock Lesnar's babyface. Is there an opportunity ever in the near future where perhaps Paul Heyman joins alongside Brock Lesnar? Is there an opportunity where maybe Paul Heyman can, I don't know, maybe go back into some sort of creative role with WWE? You know, it's so funny. When I did my interview with Authors of Pain, they spoke very highly of Paul Heyman. And the reason why I find this so incredibly funny is because WWE can be silly at times with the way that they do certain decisions. It was very clear when Paul Heyman took the creative control of Raw, there was a lot of cool stuff happening in terms of people not being used were actually starting to be used. And it appears when Paul Heyman was relieved of that specific duty, that started to change. Now, I do like Paul Heyman's work, not only in a backstage capacity, but I love what he's done on screen. I'm glad that he's re-signed with WWE for the long term. There's not another promotion that I feel like Paul Heyman should be in, and hopefully it leads to something good. All right, guys, we have talked about Johnny Gargano in the past. Some very interesting stuff. Johnny Gargano was a guest on the sessions with Renee Paquette, aka Renee Young, and basically he talked a lot about his career in WWE. This guy is just so incredibly humble, and I've said this before. I mentioned this with Mike Wexler on YouTube too, and one of the things that we kind of talked about is like Johnny Gargano is just one of those guys where, initially when I seen him before WWE, I wasn't too much of a fan of his work, right? I wasn't necessarily a fan of what he did before WWE. He came to WWE, and I seen him kind of come into his own, right? And things that I typically wouldn't like in wrestling, Johnny Gargano made me like that. And, I have a lot of praise for Johnny Gargano. I really became a fan of his work in the last few years. And when I hear what Johnny Gargano says about his time in WWE and the reason why he left WWE, I just genuinely thought this was some really interesting stuff. And it does actually get me thinking to a point where maybe Johnny Gargano, AEW, Impact, like it's a very real possibility. And it doesn't sound like he really had issues in WWE, which is another very interesting thing. But there was a couple things I wanted to mention. And one thing that I really enjoyed was this part here. So in regards to how long Johnny Gargano knew that this would be the end of his time with the company, the former NXT champion revealed he knew heavily in advance. Gargano cited being stale and giving the fans a chance to miss you, and not the change from NXT to NXT 2.0, as several reasons why he felt it was time to walk away from wrestling for a bit at this current point in his life. He says, "I kind of made my mind up in a year in advance. This was going to be my last. Like people said, Johnny left because NXT changed. No, I kind of had it in my mind. I wasn't leaving to go to any particular place. I just kind of felt like I needed to go because if you watch a TV show or something in general and you see the same character, obviously I changed character, but if you see the same person on TV for 5-6 years, it gets stale. I believe that being off TV and being away makes people miss you, and I think people have a chance to miss you, and if they don't really care in general." And this is really significant because if you look at Johnny Gargano's career, my 2 cents is this. Johnny Gargano was somebody I did not really care about before he went to WWE. Through good storytelling, good matches, seen his partnership with Ciampa on air, I became a fan of Johnny Gargano. And traditionally, the type of wrestlers that I enjoyed watching were not smaller indie wrestlers. And I saw what Johnny Gargano did in the long term, and I really felt like Johnny Gargano became a major player in pro wrestling. And I miss Johnny Gargano from television, whether it's WWE, AEW, or Impact. I think Johnny Gargano is in a situation, truth be told, wherever he does decide to return, right? I think people will make it very incredibly known that they are excited for him. Whether it's the main roster of WWE, whether it's NXT 2.0, whether it's Impact, NJPW, or AEW, wherever it may be, I think when Johnny Gargano shows up, people will be incredibly excited about that. And I think he is 100% right. You know, he's giving people a chance to miss him, and I think people do miss him. That pop is going to be explosive, and I know wrestling fans will be excited to see Johnny Gargano. I'm excited to see what happens. I really am excited to see what happens. But for those who think Johnny Gargano had a different reason for leaving WWE, hopefully this kind of explained it a little bit better. All right, guys, you saw at AEW Revolution, Eric Redbeard returned to AEW. A lot of people have asked me specifically in the Discord server. If you guys aren't in the Discord, definitely check out the link in the description. People have asked me time and time again. They said, Engo, what is going on with Eric Redbeard? And, you know, this was a last-minute booking decision by Tony Khan because Rey Fenix was injured. And I think it was pretty obvious that was the case. Now, Eric Redbeard actually revealed recently that there is no plans for him to be the leader of the Dark Order. There was also some stuff where he just kind of talked about how he's not interested in just taking a spot and obviously taking away TV time from others. And there's no solid plans for him. So it appears that AEW is in a situation where they're specifically bringing in Eric Redbeard per appearance and for no other reason. Now, this is actually really, really interesting to me. And I wish I can use a different word than interesting, but interesting is definitely the word I have to use here. AEW has a roster filled with people not being used. And they had House of Black versus Penta, and of course, Eric Redbeard, and then obviously Pac because Phoenix was out. But AEW has a ton of people on the roster not being used on a kickoff match, a pre-show match. Now, I thought Eric Redbeard absolutely looked incredible. It was pretty nice to actually see him wrestle, right? He was doing a lot of cool things in the ring, a lot of nice spots. He definitely impressed. But if you're not signing Eric Redbeard, if you have no plans for him, you have nothing to do with him, why not give that opportunity to somebody else backstage in your company? And I'm not trying to shit all over AEW here, but I just don't understand what that purpose was. If you're not signing this former WWE superstar, if you have no plans, and this guy is not interested in taking a spot from others, while I very much enjoyed this match and thought it should have been on the main card, why not give that spot to somebody else who has not been used? Unbelievable. What do you guys think? Drop a comment down below, and we'll talk about more soon.